And you
Yes, sir.
are you are talking about sorry, Raul, about Chinese socialism and how do we have to understand the model, the Chinese model, and why it's, as you say, stronger than the Soviet Union competition with the United States.
Okay. Let me explain that to you. It begins with how I understand class, capitalism, socialism, communism, because we all don't agree on that. People on the left do not agree on that, and people on the left don't agree with people on the right. Those words mean different things. So, in order for me to answer your question, I have to tell you how I understand these words. So, for me, capitalism is a particular way of organizing the production and distribution of goods and services. It's about labor, it's about the human relationships in the process of production, mostly. So, for me, the capitalist system organizes production by dividing the people who participate in production into two groups. One group we call employer, and the other group, employee, or if you like, capitalist and worker. Employer, employee. To give you an example, in feudalism, it's a different system. There you have the lord and the serf. In slavery, it's a different system. You have the master and you have the slave. Capitalism is unique because of its employer-employee relationship, so that production happens only after the employer hires, buys the labor power from the employee. That does not happen in feudalism, and that does not happen in slavery. That's the unique thing. In the United States and Great Britain, this is organized in private enterprises. That is, the employer and the employees are private individuals occupying no position in the government. It's private enterprise organized with employer-employee. In the Soviet Union, for most of its history, industry and over time an increasing part of agriculture was organized differently. The employer was the government. The employee remained private, but the employer is the government, a minister of the government who hires workers. So for me, I call that state capitalism. But, I don't care if they want to call it socialism, which they do. That's okay. There are different definitions of socialism. For them, having the government play that role was for them a definition of socialism of the Soviet kind. Whatever you think of that, the Chinese made a decision to do neither the American British private enterprise model nor the Soviet state model. What the Chinese did is a hybrid. The Chinese economy is roughly 50% private capitalist enterprise, Chinese, but also non-Chinese, Japanese, German, British, American, and so on. The other half of the Chinese economy is the state enterprise sector. So they have a hybrid. And what we have now learned, and what is going to shape the rest of this century that you and I are living in, is the fact, which cannot be denied, that this hybrid was able to grow their economy faster than either the private or the Soviet was able to do. They are standing there having figured out how to master this system better than anyone else has so far been able to do, which is why they keep catching up. The Chinese economy will be larger than the American economy by the end of this decade that we are halfway through now. And that will change everything forever. Every company in the world right now, every country in the world right now is rethinking its strategy, political, economic, to take account of China. That's how powerful all of this is. Final point. With my definition of capitalism, socialism is something else. But I'm not here to tell you there's no right and wrong. I don't believe in that. People define socialism differently, just like they defined capitalism differently or feudalism differently. For me, socialism, to be in place, has to go beyond capitalism by doing the following thing: ending the gap between those at the top and everybody else. That is, socialism for me negates master-slave, it negates lord-serf, but here comes the big one: it also must negate employer-employee. For me, socialism is when the workplace becomes a democratic community. One person, one vote, we decide, majority rules, what the enterprise will produce, what technology it will use, where the production will happen, and what will be done with the profit or the surplus that the enterprise produces. For me, that is what the dream of socialism, or for that matter, communism, was all about. So, if you want my opinion, it is that China has developed a socialism that takes the world further than the private capitalism of the West could do, and further than the state capitalism of the Soviets could do. And I believe it sets the stage for going the next step, which is the democratization of work.
Please, Uriol, you can make the next question.
Okay, so it's kind of related to China. So in a podcast, you talked about Mao's importance as a Marxist, but I want to ask you, what about his successor, Deng Xiaoping? Was he like a break from Mao or a continuation?
Well, I think he was both. I think he was shaped in important ways by Mao, by the commitment to a kind of universal democratic system. But he was acutely aware that the early efforts to go in that direction, for example, the commune movement of the 1950s, was not sustainable. In my judgment, it was a recognition that China's 100 years of humiliation when they were exploited by the Western countries and their previous history of feudalism and so on had developed in their people habits, attitudes, beliefs that were simply too difficult to overcome in a short period of time. They also reached the conclusion that in order to be a modern socialist economy, they had first to develop a basic industry, a basic transportation system, a basic educational system, and you could not do it given their poverty. So for me, the the people after Mao decided that they had to take a detour. They had to develop the economic basis for a serious effort at socialism. And so they, Xi Jinping and the others welcomed becoming rich. They encouraged their people to develop enterprises. They could be private enterprises. They kept the commanding heights. The Communist Party remained the dominant party. The Communist Party controlled the government. And between the party and the government, they felt they could control the private sector and the public sector. And I think what has happened is they have succeeded far beyond what they hoped for, because they came upon a mechanism by accident. I don't think they understood this. I don't think Mao did either. Mao never wrote it, because I've read everything of his, trying to learn as much as I could, and it's not there. But they came on the hybrid idea as a way, perhaps, to get quickly the economic foundation for a transition beyond capitalism. And I think they've achieved that. That's the plus. Here's the minus, because I'm also a Hegelian, and the plus and the minus are always wrapped up together. Something which your writer, Cervantes, understood brilliantly also, even though he wasn't a philosopher. The question is, will the Chinese, having been so successful with the employer-employee model, both in their private sector and in their public sector, and in the hybrid that the party and the state maintain, will they dare to take the next step? Or will they be stuck in what they have? It's like the question, which is also crucial for China and for the world. As the American empire goes down, will we see a transition to a Chinese empire, the way we saw the transition from the British Empire to the American Empire, or from the Dutch Empire to the British Empire? Or will the Chinese be the champions of a genuine multinational sharing of power without a single hegemon, without a single empire? I don't think that issue is decided yet, and it's probably in the hands of the Chinese how they go. But those are their twin challenges. Empire or not, break through to a democratic workplace or not. Those are the issues, and that's what Xi Jinping has to make with his colleagues there, has to make those decisions. But the superiority, and this is something I cannot overstate, the superiority of the Chinese model is now an established fact. If you are a poor country, which most of the countries in the world are, and if your number one priority is to get out of your poverty, then the model offered to you by China is the obvious choice. You may not do it, your political leaders may not want that, but you're not going to stop that, because in your society there will be ever more people who see that and who want to go in that direction. And the Chinese will help them. That's why Mr. Trump is as desperate as he is. You should not see Mr. Trump as causing the difficulties of the United States. It's the reverse. It's the difficulties of our situation that created the opportunity and literally the absurdity of a billionaire who pretends he's a champion of desperate working class. That's ridiculous. But that ridiculousness works in this moment of desperation of a declining empire.